Welcome to a new year and a new edition of Law Focus with Nathan Prescott. Nathan.
Hey, Edward. Happy 2021, man.
Happy 2021. And what a year it's been. The 2020, it's been quite a phenomenal year.
It has been a phenomenal year, and I was glad to be with Law Focus the entire year. I hope that we've sort of kept up with current events and how the law affects you and affects the viewers. We really thank everyone for viewing in 2020, and here we are in 2021. I think we're almost episode 35, in the 30s at least, and we're looking forward to working through and how the law affects you and what goes on in the future. We've got a really busy year ahead. I mean, we're on Tuesday the 19th here, so tomorrow, for instance, is Inauguration Day. When a new president comes into, power and a new vice president, there will be some new laws, I think. We've got a Democratic Congress and we've got a Democratic Senate and Democratic House. We've got a Democratic executive branch. We're going to have to see what happens in the future.
It was a clean sweep, wasn't it?
It was a clean sweep. Obviously, there's some parties out there that believe it wasn't so clean. But right as of tomorrow, there will be a new president. I think there's just no question about that. And with that, I think as time moves on, instead of the gridlock that we've seen in Washington and through Congress and the executive committee because of a split House and Senate, I think we will see some new laws implemented, both in taxes and environmental regulations and a lot of other different realms. So a new presidency like this in a consolidated government will be good for new laws. There will be some new laws. I really believe that. And guess who's going to cover them? Us.
I guess one would say new laws, and 50% of the people will be in favor of those laws, and 50% of the people will not be.
Well, just 51% in favor and 49 and not, or a little more balanced.
So it may not be gridlock, but it doesn't mean agreement necessarily.
Yeah, it's gridlock, but not unanimity, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all works out. I'm pretty excited about it and seeing how it all fleshes out, and at least giving us some fodder to report on. It's going to be very interesting.
Here's a question: with the recent trouble at the Capitol.
Sure.
Okay. Insurrection, I guess.
Sure.
How important you think that is in a historical perspective?
Oh, it's wildly important. I can't believe it would be more important. I mean, we all saw the events unfold, and there's going to be a lot of takes on it, but never has any kind of unwanted party invaded the Capitol, in hundreds of years. So, you've got a really serious thing. I'm no historian. I'm here for the Law Focus, but everybody's got their eyes wide open as to what happened there, right? And I think that it's going to cause differences in Washington. Hopefully, it'll cause some kind of comity or some kind of agreement, some concessions in politics. People will be a little more peaceful, a little more eager to work across the aisle.
How did that happen? How in the world did that actually happen?
Edward, I don't know.
How did they breach the security to that extent? And someone actually stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop.
That's correct.
How could something like that happen?
Well, you saw it
in our world today, in our country.
So I've watched a lot of the everything, and one of the things that I would like to get into today is free speech, right? We hear about free speech. I've been hearing a lot about free speech, Edward. So today I think is a really good opportunity for us to engage in a little free speech.
Free speech, okay.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
You want to do that? So I watched the news last night, Edward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched the news and I took some notes.
Can I make a confession?
Sure. You don't watch the news.
I watched the news last night for the first time since the election.
Sure. Well, I'm being remiss. You asked how did that happen. You saw how it happened, but I think that we're jumping the gun because whether we have one show out of this or whether we have 3 or 4 shows out of this, however we're going to do it, I think there's a lot of political fodder and a lot of historical fodder for us to unpack part of the law that affects you and affects everyone, and that is free speech, right? So we're going to get from free speech. Now, free speech, let me just give you a little overview of how we can do this. We can talk about free speech, what's out there now. We can talk about free speech in the context of over the airwaves. We can talk about free speech over the internet. We can talk about free speech and its limitations based on this Brandenburg test and incitement of imminent harm. So all of those things I think I can put very clearly into a historical context, or if not a historical context, at least put into something that seems really relevant for today. So that's what I'm eager to get get into. So, you watched a little bit of the news?
Last night was the first night that I watched the news since the election. I put it on Fox. And I was really kind of surprised.
Okay, what were you surprised by?
I guess I was surprised at it. It seemed like a different network.
Really?
Fox did, to me. You know, it was not that they were, you know, now in favor of Biden, let's say.
Sure.
You know, they were still in there, but they looked like a broken network.
Yeah.
From the standpoint,
they were looking for a message.
They were delivering the lines, and you know, and I was watching, and it just seemed something wasn't clicking there.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, and I've thought about this a great deal, but you know, with the internet mushrooming, can everybody choose their own news, right? So people used to trust Fox until Fox said that Trump hadn't won the election, right? Or Trump had won the election. And then there were 64 courts that said that there was no voter fraud. Fox backed that and even called Arizona, I believe, on the night of the election, right? So people started saying, well, we don't want to believe Fox anymore. Fox was our trusted news source, so now we're going to move to other media outlets like OANN, Newsmax, other media outlets that are out there that might have a message better for us.
Right.
Well, if OANN and Newsmax don't say what you want to hear, maybe you could find a more individualized news through Twitter. Maybe just the president could tweet out to you, right? So then you've got your own little pocket, your own little echo chamber where you're just hearing what you want to hear. And then Twitter, of course, demoted or took Donald Trump off the airwaves. Then you got another problem. So, I mean, then who do you talk to? Do you just talk to yourself, or who do you talk to? And we're going to get into all of that. You were jumping the gun. You sort of saw my show coming. Did you write it? I wrote this, but I think you've been peeking at my notes. So what I would like to do is go over some things that I heard on the news last night or over the last couple of nights. Mm-hmm. Now, these things may offend people because I watched both the right wing and allegedly the left wing media. I watched both sides. Mm-hmm. And I've encountered some kind of tropes on each side. And I'm going to talk about these tropes and I'm going to mention these tropes. And then we're going to go into why these tropes and why you can say these things online, or not online, but over the airwaves, right? One, immigrants are swamping us and changing America. That happens a lot. A lot of people say that, right? Immigrants are coming. There is a caravan coming. When they come in, they're going to change America. One, Trump is very dumb and egotistical. That's another little thing that you hear a lot, right? So these are both sides. These are all competing, too. White Christians are victims. They're bad victims, you know, like not only with the immigrants, but with this other state. You know, white Christians are going to be the victims of this. Two, Trump does not care about people of color. I hear that a lot, right? So you got three, elites hate you, working man. The elites, the coastal elites, they hate the working man. Remember that. It's always out there. They're always saying that. Trump is so nepotistic that he can't think about the interest of the people, of the people of the nation. He's not interested in ruling the nation. He's interested in promoting his family. Heard that a lot too, right? Western civilization is in peril. You hear that a lot, you know, and throughout the media.
Well, I would agree with that one.
Yeah. Okay. See, I'm just telling you. Just let me work through these, right? I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what you hear. Western civilization is imperiled. Immigrants are swamping us. White Christians are victims. Elites hate the working man. Trump is sort of dumb, right? Trump does not care about people of color. Trump incited the riots. You hear that a lot.
Heard that, yeah.
You're right. Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are pandering. That is, they're a lot smarter than they let on, and they're seditious. You hear that a lot. And Republicans are generally corrupt. There was a swamp. The swamp still exists. Finally, and something that you really hear a lot of is socialism is here, and we're going to have to live with it. Okay? So you hear all of those things, and all of those things, right? Even you, I could see it in your eyes. Some of them you want to jump in, and you want to say, oh, yeah, I believe that one. No, that's ridiculous, right? You want to, wait, I saw it, Edward. Don't try to fake it. It's all there. I picked that all up and just, you know, I mean, I have to do my research for this. You think I just come in here like this? I mean, you know,
a lot of research.
You know, just kidding. You come in and you hear all these things. Immigrants are swamping us. Trump is very dumb. There's nepotism. Trump's a criminal. You get it all, right?
I've heard every one of them.
You heard every one of them. And believe it or not, and this is what's really intriguing to me, is sometimes like you've seen that movie The Matrix, and sometimes you see The Matrix. Mm-hmm. If you get online, if you get on Twitter, if you read the New York Times, if you read the Washington Post, if you read Fox News, if you read whatever, or you turn on cable news, or you turn on WLX, or whatever, and then you read the Sun Herald or you read the Times-Picayune, right? I dare anyone to do that and then rewatch Law Focus and try to and get 20 points out of all of those sources and have them not fit into one of these 10 categories, because it's over and over and over and over.
Right.
And there's just variations on a theme,
right.
Very slight variations.
I agree with you. You're exactly right. You hit on both sides there.
Yeah, so just be aware of that. Now, why can I get up here and say that? I'm not espousing any one of those views. I want y'all to decide how you feel, but it's just really enjoyable for me to see it in your eyes, and I can hear it in Clarence back there. Everybody's saying, well, golly, Nathan, I believe in that, I don't believe in that. Why can we get into that? Why can I say that? Why can the government not come in and say, Nathan, there's a Trump administration, you said Trump is very dumb. Nathan, there's a Trump administration, you said Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are pandering seditionists. Why can I say that? Clarence, cue the tape. Can you put that first? There it is. That is the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. It was passed way back in 1791.
That's the original document published.
That's it. Actually, I have a copy at my home. Not a copy. That's the original. It's just not signed. I had a little drawing on there that was going to be a good gag, but Edward said we're going to keep it really professional today. And so this is it. So I'm going to read it to you, everyone. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, we've been through that, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So what we're focused on, that document's living, they say, that we get subject to interpretation. But what's not living is the ink on the page. So there it is. It's right there. Way back in 1791, it was adopted as the First Amendment. Now, it's got a lot in there. It's got up top, it's got the establishment of religion, free exercise of religion. But where we are right now, and what's most important right now to our time today, is the abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Now, who cannot abridge the freedom of speech or of the press? Go ahead, back up to it. Congress, right? The government can't abridge the freedom of speech or of the press, right? So you're an employer, right? I'm an employer. Can you tell your employees what to do? I mean, you're not Congress. Can you suppress speech within the workplace? That's a question, right? The answer is yes, you can. But so the First Amendment's out there. A lot of people want to say, why, how my free speech right is imposed upon, or my free speech right is limited? First Amendment, we'll read the whole First Amendment, guys. The First Amendment says that Congress, which has been held to be the government, right, including state governments through another amendment that sort of bookends it in, cannot abridge freedom of speech. So keep that in mind. But why can we say that immigrants are swamping us and changing America? Why can we say that Western civilization is in peril? Why can Edward agree with some of these people that Western civilization is in peril? And why can other media outlets clearly argue that Trump incited the riots? Why can
because we have free speech.
We got free speech,
right? And
the government can't allow us to do otherwise. But that gets deeper, right? Because, and we'll get into it after the break. Thanks, Clarence. 1 moment.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll be right back. Let's meet Dr. Lauren Timmons. Dr. Lauren Timmons, practicing dentistry here in Ocean Springs. Welcome to
Thank you.
the show. Now, let's talk about the machine that allows you to do an implant and a new tooth in one visit.
Okay, there's two parts. There's a 3D X-ray machine, which is relatively new to dentistry. We take a 3D X-ray and we're able to design the implants in a three-dimensional X-ray. And then there is a CEREC machine, which we're able to mill out and design crowns to go on top of those implants.
And so literally a person can break the tooth off, come in, have the tooth extracted, have a new implant put in and the tooth screwed in, and walk out with a new tooth in the same day.
Correct, with the crown on the implant in one visit.
That would have been considered probably a miracle 10 years ago. Right?
Impossible.
Impossible.
Right.
Well, thank you for being here in Ocean Springs with us, and I hope everyone will come to see Dr. Lauren Timmons in Ocean Springs.
Thank you, Ed.
The Mississippi Gulf Coast is an amazing place. Business is booming here, and life is good. People say Elvis used to hang out here, and it's true. So did Al Capone. It's the legend of the Biloxi Mafia, and I don't know if that's true, but there is a place out at Cat Island called Smuggler's Cove where rum runners used to offload their bootleg alcohol into skiffs and smuggle it to shore. You get to know the people here, and you're going to hear a lot of unbelievable stories. This place has a rich history. We call it the Secret Coast because of the 26 miles of beautiful white sand beaches and the picturesque islands that dot the horizon. You can visit those islands and they all have a story of their own. People who live all over the world quietly choose to make this place their home. I'm one of them, and I want to help build a community of entrepreneurs like me who are doing what they love. That's what the show's all about. So come on in and watch Sprout Central, the happiest show on TV.
Back to Law Focus with Nathan Prescott, and where were we?
Well, everywhere we were, your eyes were getting big and small and big and small, and I was enjoying exercising my right to free speech. Right? That's what was happening.
We're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. Was that fun?
Speech. Yes, it was.
It was fun. Now, another part of the right of free speech is the right to talk like that and not have the government infringe. So you think about that. You think about that outside of a television station, right? Or you think about that, on the street or in a public forum or in your own home, what you can say. But what about, let's talk about this in the context, and we'll get to Twitter, and we'll get to Facebook, and we'll get to Google and Amazon. But let's talk about it first from a historical perspective. There used to be big conglomerates that controlled media, right? So now there's an argument that Twitter controls the media because that's how a lot of people receive their news now, But that same problem existed in the United States in the 1940s. There was an idea that, there was radio broadcasts and television was about to come up, and they were saying, who controls the airwaves? Well, the only people that could get on the air were oligarchs. They were rich people that could control everything. Well, the government came in and said, oh no, if just the rich people are able to publish whatever they want, then we're going to have a problem because we're only going to have one kind of viewpoint, right? So everybody started getting really weird about it. Ultimately, an act was passed, and it was called the Fairness Doctrine, right? And the Fairness Doctrine dictated, and it was passed in the 1940s because there were three companies owned radio and television. Mm-hmm. So if those three companies decided to say the sky is purple, then people would ultimately begin to believe the sky is purple because it would be propaganda. They would hear it all day. Mm-hmm. So the Fairness Doctrine came into play. The Fairness Doctrine dictated that you got to, as a broadcaster, whether it be radio or television, you would have to give people equal time, not equal time so much as what we see now with political candidates, but you would have to, what they said, equitably entertain different points of view. You would have to give people a fair speech. So, for instance, if today on Law Focus, this is old, right? And this is before cable and before what we're doing now, and before all of that. But let's just say Law Focus was on the airwaves like this, and I wanted to stick to one side of the line here, either the Trump is very dumb line or the immigrants are swamping us line. I would have to entertain the other. I would necessarily, pursuant to the Fairness Doctrine, pursuant to law, have to go in there and say, some people say immigrants are swamping us and changing America, but some people say that they're not. I would have to entertain both those points of view. Mm-hmm. And that law stayed in place from 1947 to way up until the Reagan administration, until 1987. So we had 40 years of a Fairness Doctrine where the radio and television were relatively, were sort of, they had some equality to them. You'd say one thing, you'd have to say another. You say one thing, you have to say another. You have to give fair balance. You have to have fair balance to each party. But ultimately, that doesn't work, right? Because that is some kind of governmental restriction on speech, right? What if you do own the airwaves and you're in control of the airwaves and you don't want to talk about the other side? You know, there's a problem there. Right. So in 1987, 1988, the FCC, here's how they got to it. The FCC controls the airwaves, right? So somehow the United States government controls the sky above us in a lot of ways, right? So they control the airwaves. They said if you want to use the airwaves to publish this stuff, then you don't have to apply the fairness doctrine anymore. The fairness doctrine is no longer, because what you had was you had the government going in and saying, hey, you know, Edward, you said X, but you didn't say Y, you could be in trouble. Now, not a lot of people were prosecuted under the fairness doctrine, but it was out there. And big time conglomerates and broadcasters really had to give it a lot of thought.
Well, you know, the broadcast spectrum is a public spectrum.
Right.
So it's governed by.
Okay, it's governed by,
Whereas cable,
Right.
Cable, with the rise of cable during the Reagan administration.
it's private.
It's well, yeah, and it's not using public airwaves. So
Right.
the restrictions that the government can place, like for example, you can say certain
Curse words, the George Carlin words?
Yeah, you can
Right.
say those words on cable without any issue, because that is something someone is subscribing to, right? It's not over public airwaves, but you can't do that over broadcast.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, do you want the government telling you what you have to say, right? You know, do you want the government dictating? With the fairness doctrine, it was sort of a impositional thing. If you say this, you got to say this. The government was sort of saying, like, this is what you can do. If you do this, you have to do this. So the question is, do you want the government sort of getting into cable? I mean, do you want the government doing that? And ultimately, in 1987, which sort of changed the way that we see news, they said, no, the government can't do that. Cable's private. You know, you move on from there. Pretty interesting, right? So then what happened? Well, cable changed, right? The way we got our news began to change pretty much in 1987, because in the early 90s, what do we have? We got the internet, and then we got the Clinton administration, right? So you've got something that's still in place today. Now, the fairness doctrine is gone, but something that you hear a lot about today is the Communications Decency Act. Okay, this is another thing that may or may not be changed, okay? So the Communications Decency Act of 1996 was during the Clinton administration, right? And what was happening with that? What necessitated that? Well, we had the internet and pornography all over the internet, and nobody knew what to do. You know, pornography, which used to be this stuff that was, you had to like go to the gas station or wherever and buy it, was now all over the internet. So the Clinton administration decided to get in there and do things regarding the regulation of speech and have this thing called the Communications Decency Act of 1996. Well, the Communications Decency Act of 1996 did not stand up wholly because, believe it or not, it violated a lot of constitutional rights for free speech. Pornography is not illegal. Obscenity, and I'll get into that later, but obscenity is illegal, but pornography is not, right? So the distribution of pornography over the internet is not an illegal act. And what the government was trying to do through the Communications Decency Act of 1996, without putting too fine a point on it, and I'm no expert on this, but they were trying to regulate content on the internet and what you could and could not see, right? Part of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. Now remember, the Reagan administration has said, open it up. Let everybody talk about whatever they want, right? Now the Clinton administration comes in and says, shut it all down, or shut the internet down, limit it a little. A lot of that is stricken. But in Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996, there's a grant of immunity for sort of the umbrella of the people that allow for platforms. So like Google, Twitter, all these companies now, they obviously didn't exist there. It says you've got immunity from policing. That is, if somebody gets on your thing and exchanges obscene news, you're immune, right? You can't get sued for having the platform, right? So that's called the Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. Now, what that does is say, look, it essentially opens up the internet, right? That's still in there. It says, everybody can get in there and they can do whatever they want, and then the platforms themselves won't be sued. Well, there's a question now as to whether that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act should be revoked. Trump wanted it revoked. Trump's out of office. He's gone, tomorrow. So we're going to see what happens there.
Yeah.
Because if you start to make Twitter, Facebook, and all those companies regulate, liable for what is going on there, then they're a big police, and then you've got, again.
Well, yeah, they're not responsible for the content.
You're right.
But when they cross the line and they start regulating and saying, we're going to block your account because we don't like your viewpoint. Now they're not just curating content. Now
they're choosing.
They're legislating law, as far as what can run. Now they fall under losing the right to be protected by that law.
Oh, that's the rule. That's how you see it.
That's how I see it. I mean,
that's how you would like it.
If you are
you can't curate content.
If you're a platform, let's say you're a platform, and
Edward, but I mean, what if you're a newspaper? If you're a newspaper and you want to have an opinion piece that says X, Y, Z, you can't.
Yeah. But you see.
Yeah, no. I don't see.
Let's say you've got like Twitter. Okay, they're a platform. Facebook, they're a platform. Okay, so
Parler.
So if
Newsmax.
They can't control the content that's coming through, so they can't be held liable.
Right.
They're a platform for others. But once they start legislating who can participate in the platform by saying, we don't agree with you, so you are banned.
Okay. So
once they ban somebody, now they're exercising control over the content.
Sure.
Whereas before they were just simply a neutral platform.
So
once they do that, they've crossed the line, and they should lose. They should lose the ability.
That's your argument.
Protected, because they've changed the fundamental nature of how they got that special treatment in the first place.
You believe 100% neutrality, and if you curate it all, if you take let's just say there's some obscenity on there. There's some kind of thing that's clearly obscene. You take that off once, then you're open to liability?
Well, I mean, as a platform, a neutral platform, if people want to put any type of content, you're neutral. I mean, because you're only a vehicle.
You say the moment you start policing them, you become liable for everything.
Once you start legislating who can participate in the platform, you've crossed the line of being a neutral party. Mm-hmm. You're now actively segregating content based on your beliefs. And so you should lose your ability to be protected by that law because...
Well, you're not now, guys. So my job right now is to report the law, and that is not the law at all.
They did not lose it yet.
No. And I don't know if they will.
They probably won't now.
Right.
But if Trump would have continued on, they might have.
They might have.
Because he was one of the ones they were blocking, see? So...
Yeah, they were blocking him.
They were blocking him, and they didn't like what he was saying, or they thought it was, So look, I mean, it's the truth, though. I mean, broadcasting, if you're in the broadcasting business, you're creating content, so you're liable. If we'd say something terrible on the air, the station has got a problem. But if you're a platform and we're not creators, we're just a pass-through.
Right.
Great. But once I start blocking people,
oh, you believe the curation would sort of be like an act of creation? I mean, because you are.
It is creation.
Right.
Because I'm saying that you can't come on. I'm legislating content. I'm making decisions based on not a neutral platform. It's just a pass-through for other people's content. That's why they had the freedom of not having the liability because they were only a platform. Mm-hmm. But once you start legislating content, you're making decisions.
Yeah, so it's a very slippery slope, right?
Slippery slope, yeah.
Yeah, if you open it up to, if you open up that, then those platforms, they either got to, in your argument, you'd either have to choose to do nothing at all, right? Do no policing.
No policing, because if
you police once, liable.
Well,
that's scary.
They've policed many times, and they haven't lost the ability to be protected yet.
Right.
But now,
I think that's pretty tough. I understand what you're advocating for, and I wonder if there's some kind of sliding scale that might satisfy you. Because as it appears to me now, if you've got a platform like that, and you see some obscenity, some child stuff or, some strange stuff, and you take it down, then you're automatically subject to the liabilities.
Well, I mean, I think that there needs to be a distinction between what's illegal content versus what is opinion, I mean, if somebody is putting pornography up there that, has to do with children or whatever, and they take it down, I think that's a different thing because they are upholding the law.
So okay, and this is why I have a job, because there are always these gray areas, right? So
gray area, yeah.
So here we go. So when they banned Trump, right? When they said no more Trump,
right.
It was all about the election,
right?
And him saying what? Him saying that it was a fraud, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean they've banned him before that,
sure.
too. At certain points.
So I guess what you're saying on the fraud thing is that wasn't necessarily illegal. It was just Twitter just deemed it wrong.
They disagreed with it,
right?
And it was an opinion. I mean, it wasn't he wasn't declaring martial law or using it to declare martial law.
You do believe that private actors like Twitter have a right to curate content, but you just don't believe that they have a right to curate content and seek immunity.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely.
Well, under the law, they have a right to curate content.
They have a right to curate content, but they're supposed to be a neutral platform. That's what I'm.
If they're given that, if they're protected in your mind.
But once you start legislating the content, then you're not a neutral platform, right? Because you are saying you can't see this, people, because we don't want you to see it. Okay, now you've crossed the line. Now, you're now a content creator.
Except with child porn.
Huh?
Except with child porn.
I mean, if something's already against the law, I think that's a distinction there. But if something is within the realm of public discourse and you're censoring it, and you're being protected at the same time that you're censoring it, the other people don't get a chance to participate in that discourse.
Sure.
They've crossed the line.
They don't get a chance to participate in that discourse on that platform. I 100% agree. There are other platforms.
There are other platforms, yeah. I mean, Twitter is a big one, and they're protected. So is Facebook. And Facebook did the same thing. They all kind of lined up.
Yeah.
That way. I mean, the media generally has always been sort of on the left, right? Throughout history. I mean, you've got new elements now like Fox and some
Newsmax and OANN.
But I mean, historically speaking, from the time of CBS News, Walter Cronkite, William Paley, everybody's kind of been to the left. It's always has been that way. There's never been really never been a right-leaning network until Fox came along.
And that was big.
And that was Rupert Murdoch, and that was big.
And it's very popular.
It's very popular because they're a lot. Well, if you've got 50% of the people here and 50% of the people here.
They're going to watch something.
Well, yeah.
Everybody's going to watch something.
Watching Fox and then splitting up the other 50% between all the other networks.
That brings me to a really good point. Like, we were talking, and there are so many nuances there, and I appreciate your perspective on that. But remember that certain types of speech are just not protected, right? You can't protect them. So we've got some obscenity that we talked about earlier. And another kind of speech out there is this Brandenburg speech. And Brandenburg speech is from this case called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And that is, I don't know how much time we have, but that's a case that came out in 1969. And essentially, Ohio had passed a law that said you can't say certain things or you can't do things that might incite violence, right? It was out there, and a KKK man came out and said, we're going to march on Washington, we're going to do all these terrible things, and it might be violent and these kind of things. But it was sometime in the future that he alleged it would happen. We didn't know, but it was going to happen sometime in the future. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court came down and overturned his conviction, Brandenburg's conviction, and said, hey, look, there's certain things that are protected, and this is one of those things because you did not incite imminent violence, right? So it's like an imminent danger test. And frankly, I think Twitter and Facebook and Google and Amazon and everybody that has said, President Trump, you're off the air, is going to hide behind that Brandenburg test and say, what you did prior to, well, for right or wrong, remember, I'm just reporting, what you did prior to the Capitol insurrection or the Capitol riots, the Capitol actions was an incitement of imminent harm, right? You said, look, we're going to march on Washington, you got to have strength, and you had a reasonable right, or you had a reasonable expectation that was what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm really enjoying learning your views, Edward, is that, if Trump says the election was fraudulent and no court agrees with him, right, you would say, leave him alone.
Well, I mean, the proof will come out sooner or later that it's either true or not true, and evidently it's been proven, that it is untrue what he said. I don't know where he got his information, but it's
Right.
been proven that that was not the case.
So you're a real, so on Twitter on that, Twitter is not a governmental actor, right? So we agree that Twitter can curate. We may or may not agree as to where the liability falls, right?
Yeah.
That's fair. So you're okay with Twitter saying we can take them off. But if you were writing the laws, if you had a neutral, you would just let them talk and let the truth come out through public discourse.
I mean,
And that's been an argument for a long time. Like, if everybody just talks, then people will figure it out.
this is a special segment of Law Focus I want to mention that we're not going our usual time. We're going with a special 1 hour presentation today,
Well, yeah.
because I was getting cues in my ear, and I wanted to let the director know that we are going for another. It'll be a total 60-minute show for our viewers out there today, because we're talking about the new year. We're talking about something very special.
Sure.
But here's the thing. As a broadcaster, as a person who's been in broadcasting, as an on-air person, and then as a person involved in management and buying a station, whatever. I mean, and in being in radio too, I'm acutely aware of the fact that, you have a responsibility to, when you're disseminating information and you're using the public airwaves, there are laws to go by as far as slander, liability, different things that
Right.
you cannot do on the air. And if you do, you're opening up to problems, because you have the ability to do irreparable harm out there by putting false information out over the airwaves. Okay, now, that's a broadcaster's view. That's my view.
Yeah.
Now, new media, meaning Twitter and other
New media, yeah, that's a good word for it.
Okay, new media, they are also in the business of communicating information, just like we are in broadcast.
Sure.
However, they do not have the same laws that apply to them, because in the beginning of all that, their mantra was, we're not producing content.
Ah, so you say by the curation, there's a
We are
production.
a platform for all comers. So how could you hold us liable, Twitter, because someone says something that we're allowing them to say as a free platform? Okay, the government said, yes, you're right. You're not a creator, so you are immune from that law. Okay? Now, they're immune from it is because they're not content creators. But now, if I start to
Curate.
curate, and if I start to censor, then now, in a way, I am curating,
Right.
right? Because I'm censoring. So the law of not being liable should go away, because now they are actively producing by censoring.
Right.
And I think that's where they're coming from.
Your argument was sort of in for a penny, in for a pound. Once you start doing it, it's hard to close it back up, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you could do with everything, I mean, and anything you disagree with, you can just shut it down.
And there will be some of evolution in the law there. Yeah, there has to be. Well, I mean, well, there has to be, because no law is stagnant, right? Or no rule is stagnant. We're going to see what happens, because we've got brand new forms of media out there, new media. And I'm not a Facebook user, and I do see Twitter occasionally, but I'm not active on Twitter and don't have a Twitter account. Nevertheless, you cannot help but be influenced by it. I mean, you look up something that you're interested in, a Twitter feed might pop up, or I totally understand that Facebook has moderators and things like that try to keep it a certain way. Mm-hmm. If you remove that immunity, and you try to get, I don't know how many people are on Twitter, 500, I mean, hundreds of millions, right? Right. And you try to get Twitter liable for what could be happening over five, it would be over. That would be the end.
It would be the end. It would be the end, and that's why it's such a big deal, because if you remove the liability, they would be sued,
daily.
Yeah,
forever.
They can't survive it. Same with Facebook. Believe it or not, even as huge as Facebook is, it would end their model, and there would be a new disruptor that would come out. They disrupted, right? They were disruptors, and they disrupted.
Maybe their time is done.
There will be another disruptor, and that disruptor will disrupt their model, and and then succeed until something disrupts it, you know.
Right.
But anyway, but it's been a very interesting thing to see, you know, to think, and also the new, to have a platform like that censor the president
Yeah.
of the United States.
Brand new.
It could be anybody that they're censoring, it would be an issue, but in this case, they're censoring the president of the United States.
Yeah, it makes it very interesting. I mean,
interesting,
it's you asked about like how I think it goes down in history, and I'm not one to speak on that, but this is a big deal.
It's a big deal, and how
It's
could
a
they-
very big deal.
How could they have even gotten in through security to occupy the
Well,
Capitol?
that is a big deal, right? But that's human activity, right? I mean, how could they have done it? We saw it. You know, there's not a lot of people there protecting. They get in, it's there. But what's just very interesting is like the quieting of Trump on his main megaphone, right? Twitter is his megaphone. He loves it.
It was.
It was. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
They took it away from him.
Took him away, shut it down.
And they shut him down on a lot of different platforms.
But, you know, it just goes to show you, you know, to have a force like that, insurrectionists, take over the Capitol, it shows you that that anything can be done. Nothing is really outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think there's a big day ahead of the United States tomorrow with the inauguration.
Yeah.
You know, hopes and prayers that it goes smoothly.
Yeah.
We don't want to see anything, but everybody's sort of geared up.
Yeah.
Depending on how much you watch the news, right?
Right.
I mean, like if you watch the news none, you know, you might just be walking around. It's a very sunny day out in
Well,
Ocean Springs.
I've
If you watch the news a good bit, you know, you might be bunkered down with your
After
weapons
the
and your
election,
MREs.
I got, with all of the hoop to do about the election
Right.
and all this, I got so, it was like the Saints lost the game the other day. It was the same feeling of like, I've had enough, and so I turned it off. I never watched it one day until last night I watched it.
Sure.
But, you know, it's, I don't know. It's, I was going to make a particular point there, and I don't remember now what the point was, but it's just been, you know, I would tell you by not watching the news over the last, you know, since November, right? So December and January, since not watching the news all throughout the holidays. Oh, here's my point. I've been reading a book on a daily basis called, I think it's called The Daily Stoic.
Okay.
Okay, and they take little pieces of information from the Roman Stoics and such, you know.
Yeah, Aurelius and
Okay, so
Epictetus.
Marcus Aurelius. So one of the elements they talked about on one particular day, a few days ago, was circle of control.
Okay.
And your circle of control are the things that you can control versus the things you can't. And so I can't control.
You don't have any control over it.
I have no control over all of that stuff. And by delving into it and having it upsetting my mind every day, or having it disrupts my ability to get stuff done.
Oh, there's no question about it.
So,
you can get as deep into it as you want, and I think that, you know, during the election cycle and during even this period right now, you know, there's a question as to how involved should you be. Frankly, everyone out there, you know, you have very little, I have very little ability to change any of it, right? We know that. And it sort of instills in you a sense of sort of peaceful insignificance. But if we all just say we're totally insignificant, what, you know, then you've got like questions of meaning and what goes on there too, you know?
Yeah.
Right, we don't have any ability to change it.
No.
And we can vote. I'm proud of that.
We can vote. We have that, but that's within our circle of control.
And we can...
Our choices are within the circle of control.
Right, sort of existential. And we can engage in discourse with each other and maybe influence our friends or, you know, impart a little kindness in the world. There's a lot of things we can do. But yes, if you turn off the news, it's amazing how much more peaceful life is.
It's the truth. I mean, and it's always been, news business by nature is a sensation.
But you've been in the, it is. You've been in the news business for a long time, but it's very sensational now, would you say?
It's more so than ever, yeah.
Every day.
It's completely sensational.
Right.
You know, and you know, back in those old days, you had moderators who tried to be straight down the middle, you know.
Sure.
Like Walter Cronkite, for example. But today, I mean, everybody's so partisan. and it's such opinion.
Because it is so, and we talked about that, like being able to choose your news source, and really being able to sort of curate or curtail like everything down and distill everything down to where somebody's talking just to you. I mean, you could
hear only what you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. You can do it. Well, you heard what I did. I mean, just over the last 2 days, we were like putting this show together. I mean, you heard the points of view, the point and the counterpoint.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just all over the place.
That's exactly where it's happening too. You got all of those points of being on
all day, and we can all access it from our phones instantaneously. Like a lot of my mindset, or a lot of your mindset, or a lot of the mindset of the people that I'll run into on the street as I walk out of here is dictated by what app they click on their phone, right? Who they choose to follow, and who knows when we started going down that path, and who reads the New York Times and who reads OANN. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that an OANN reader starts reading the New York Times on a whim, or the New York Times reader starts reading the OANN and saying, I'm really starting to come that way. I mean, that might happen sometimes, but where does it begin? Where do you become a New Yorker reader versus a, I don't know, another magazine reader?
Well, let's take a break, and we'll be right back with more of Law Focus. Stay tuned. Well, Dr. Lauren Timmons, who practices dentistry here in Ocean Springs, cosmetic dentistry, family dentistry, is here with us. Welcome to the program, Doc.
Thank you, Ed.
It's almost a miracle what can be done today. For example, person has an accident, let's say the tooth is broken, they can go in, you can pull the tooth, put the implant in, build a tooth right there, put it in, and they walk out with a whole new tooth implanted in.
That is correct.
One day, one visit.
That is correct. No gooey impressions, no second appointment. All thanks to 3D X-ray technology, which we have in our office, which is a big deal, game changer in dentistry today.
And that's a very, very new technology, right?
It is, and we're proud to offer that here. And then we design and mill out the crowns, fire them in an oven, and seat them all in one day.
10 years ago, that would be considered impossible, right?
Correct, yeah, and we have that technology today.
Thanks for being here with us in Ocean Springs.
Thank you.
Let's put our heads together on a great staycation. Berry Creek Cabins in nearby Bogalusa, Louisiana is your wilderness staycation headquarters. Cozy cabin lodging for 4 to 12 people with modern amenities, kitchens, relaxing porches, fishing, and a 2,700 square foot party deck pavilion. Call 985-730-4395 or berrycreekcabins.com. Berry Creek Cabins is family staycation headquarters.
The Mississippi Gulf Coast is an amazing place. Business is booming here, and life is good. People say Elvis used to hang out here, and it's true. So did Al Capone. The legend of the Biloxi Mafia, and I don't know if that's true, but there is a place out at Cat Island called Smuggler's Cove where rum runners used to offload their bootleg alcohol into skiffs and smuggle it to shore. You get to know the people here, and you're going to hear a lot of unbelievable stories. This place has a rich history. We call it the Secret Coast because of the 26 miles of beautiful white sand beaches and the picturesque islands that dot the horizon. You can visit those islands, and they all have a story of their own. People who've lived all over the world quietly choose to make this place their home. I'm one of them, and I want to help build a community of entrepreneurs like me who are doing what they love. That's what the show's all about. So come on in and watch Sprout Central, the happiest show on TV.
Back to Law Focus with Nathan Prescott.
Hi.
One of the
special hour edition.
Special hour edition.
No, we did not plan for the hour edition. This is all right here off the cuff.
This is a new year and a lot of stuff going on.
All right.
I read this morning that CNN is calling for the censorship of ONN and also Fox News. They're calling for the censorship of very conservative, right-wing leading.
No way. Can't happen, right?
Well, I mean, it's unusual that they're making that statement because, if you look back,
But where did you hear that CNN called for it? On OANN?
Probably.
See, that's right.
It was probably that someone was reporting. Maybe it was on Fox. I'm not sure, but somebody was reporting that CNN actually was calling for this.
Sure.
That's news in itself.
Sure.
I don't think it was on one of those, but you know, as like if you look back in history, like at the Russian Revolution.
Sure.
I'm not saying we're moving toward communism.
Right.
I'm not making that claim.
Oh, you're not? Wait,
I'm
this
not
is
making
just
that claim.
claim 3.
I'm not making a claim.
It's claim
I'm saying,
socialist. No, claim 5. Socialism
I'm
is
saying
here.
one of the tactics that the Bolsheviks used when they got into power, and the Tsar was taken out of power, and the communists came in. One of the tactics was to whitewash history.
Sure.
So, in other words, that tactic is being used today. You know, you can see that they're leaning toward that. In other words, if there's something happened historically, whether it's important or not, if you whitewash it and condemn it and cancel it, it's whitewashed. It never happened.
Right.
Whether it's got historical significance or historical context or whatever, if you come out and you whitewash it to the extent that it never happened, you've whitewashed it from reality, and it's forgotten about going forward. That's not right to do.
No,
you know?
It's not. And you know, I don't think that. You know, I don't know if that's happening. I don't know who alleged this. I would really be interested. It's sort of like when you're in trial, so we can sort of link it to court and those kinds of things. But you're in trial and they say, well, look, this document says X, Y, Z. You say, well, let me go ahead and read that document because everybody reads it a little differently. Mm-hmm. I would love to see what CNN is trying to do versus OANN. It seems like CNN would be interested in allowing those kinds of free interchange of ideas. Now,
I think so.
There are, yes, and you know, I haven't seen the source, so we need to look into that. But if CNN is saying OANN and Newsmax and you guys need to be censored, I'm concerned about that.
Well, they're inciting insurrection.
Yeah, they're inciting the insurrection.
They're playing that card.
There it goes, and that's beautiful, and I'm so glad that we hit that because that's the Brandenburg test, right? You had the KKK guy. The KKK guy had some vague ideas that something should happen, right? And didn't have a definite time. And the Supreme Court came back and said, and let's just get it right down focused to these cases, because remember how we talked about stare decisis and things like that in other shows. Let the decision stand, right? This is our law from 1969 Brandenburg versus Ohio case, and this is what dictates what you just said, right? Look, I'm very excited about this because we started with Trump and potentially his Brandenburg violations. Now we're here, CNN calling for the censorship of OANN. But why are they calling for it? Again, because of a Brandenburg violation. A Brandenburg violation says that there's an intent to speak, there's an imminence of lawlessness, and a likelihood of lawlessness. So you see what CNN's doing is saying it's not trying to censor speech so much as it's trying, well, it is trying to censor speech, but it's trying to censor speech on grounds that the Supreme Court has said speech can be censored on these grounds, right? So it's trying to have the United States government impose a law in violation of the First Amendment, right? But that violation has been sort of carved out as protected because of Brandenburg versus Ohio. It's very interesting, but I'm excited about it because that's where the context comes from. That's why we have this show, is because we're talking about things that might have been around, what was 1969, so that's 52 years. It's been in the books for 52 years, and it still holds true. You cannot incite imminent lawlessness, and there's a standard for it. CNN may be calling for OANN censorship. You know, I don't know a lot about OANN. I haven't watched a lot of it, but I would be interested. I would be interested to see what happens there. You know, if you've got a megaphone and people are really trusting you, and you go out and say, you know, and you've got a reasonable expectation that you can say, you know, go out and overthrow the United States government, and you believe that people will listen to you and do that, and those people are empowered to do it, you know, that might be Brandenburg speech, and that would be interesting to see.
That would be, you're right. You know, that's a different thing.
Right. So we'll see.
Yeah. So
we would have, you know, you and I think, admit, one, the more news you watch, the more riled up you get, and then two, you know, you got to watch a lot of news to understand if there's any violation in there at all. We don't know, right? I don't know if OANN's doing it or CNN's doing it. I don't know who's doing it. I don't watch enough news, but it would be interesting to see if it is happening. But Brandenburg excites me. That case excites me.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, you know, that case is there, and we all know about it. And in doing my research, it didn't really take me long, you know, not pat myself on the back, but it was cool that I recalled it, you know, because it's not something I do every day, obviously. But I did recall the name of Brandenburg. So I was able to pull it up really easily, and I was like, when was the last time I thought of that case? But it is right here, like ripe for talking about on Law Focus, because you know, that's part of the impeachment papers. We haven't even mentioned the word impeachment, but that's definitely part of the impeachment papers.
We could have a whole day of doing a show.
So
like
that's
that.
part of the impeachment papers, and then just through our conversation, through our discourse and our dialectic, it occurred to us that maybe CNN was trying to pull a Brandenburg question on OANN and Newsmax.
Do you ever remember a time where it was more divisive than it is right now?
You know, no, absolutely not. But you know, I eat lunch every day with my colleagues, and you know, I have, you know, just live my life, and you do hear it's very divisive out there. The way to keep it not divisive is just to hang out with people that you agree with 100% of the time, and that's sort of difficult, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Or just don't hang out with anybody at all and just read your news source that you prefer.
Or don't talk about politics.
Or don't talk about politics. But right now, people are finding it harder and harder and harder. I mean, but for COVID and the separation that COVID caused at family holidays, there probably would have been some pretty hot debates.
On top of all of this,
COVID
virus.
COVID's still around.
On top of everything, which there's a lot of people that believe that there's something unnatural about what has happened here. And
can I go out on Twitter and say COVID is not real? Can I do that?
You can.
I can do that.
I think that you can do that.
I can say that COVID.
I think that would not be censored because it's already out there. Some people believe it is real. Some people believe it's not real. I mean, or that it's maybe manufactured. Or.
But your idea is, but if they flag that.
Do they flag it?
I think Twitter flags that as like a false claim.
Do they?
But as soon as they start curating that,
well, that's another curation in a way.
Oh shoot.
It's another curation because they
But you're saying I know, but you're saying once they're curated, liable.
Well, I mean, then they're not a platform, a neutral platform. They're not a technological platform. They are a platform that's being censored or curated by humans who are not supposed to be, you know.
And they lose their neutrality then.
Yeah.
In your opinion.
Yeah, right. So then they lose the
oh man, they do have a lot of power.
They do.
And you know, there's a lot of people on Twitter that say, well, you know, there are other platforms, and there are a lot of people that say, well, we want to use Twitter, right? So it's a hard thing. Now, Twitter is not a public forum. You know, I mean, it is a private thing. You have to sign licensing agreements. It's not like being able to walk on the street if you're a United States citizen, right?
Right.
But there, when they get so big, it calls into question new forms of media and new forms of regulation that probably will exist maybe in this year's episodes of Law Focus.
Well, the old laws based on, you know, broadcasting and such are still applying and do still apply to things that are, you know, new, like new media, like Twitter, for example.
Sure.
Those laws are antiquated as relates to that.
They can't keep up.
Because, yeah, it's a whole new media. Those ideas weren't even being thought of back at the time that law was made. So
the Twitter invented these new media.
Trying to, you know, apply old laws to new media. So. Yeah, you can't. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Twitter. I mean, you can remember when Facebook was the king, and then Twitter was like, what is Twitter? Like, who can never convey a full message in those number of characters? And the characters changed, and you know, everything changes.
And there'll be more things because, you know,
there's always going to be that kind of evolution,
the disruption.
Right? The disruption.
The disruption.
The growth, the death, the disruption, over and over and over. Is that right?
Killer apps. You know, killer apps come in and kills that app.
Right.
It kills that.
It kills Twitter. TikTok kills YouTube or whatever.
Uber killed the taxi drivers.
Right.
You know, kind of, you know.
Sure.
And so there's a killer app, you know. And Twitter's a killer app too. I mean, in its own way. But there'll be more killer apps coming, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And then we'll be here on Law Focus to sort of outline how the law affects them.
Yes, and on that note, let's say goodbye because we're out of time.
We did it.
This special edition of Law Focus, and we'll see you next time here with Law Focus with Nathan Prescott.
Happy 2021, and you know, let's all be safe for Inauguration Day.